from Dennis.
Hey, Jim.
All right.
Hey, Raj, it's Drew. Can I ask a quick question? The live stream says it ended 2 minutes ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's switch on.
Okay.
We were testing to see if you're watching.
Thank you.
Drew, your desk looks empty here.
Now I'm getting feedback on the video of the live stream.
Is there feedback now?
No, not right at the moment, but I still don't have a live stream.
Neither do I. It says ended 3 minutes ago.
They gotta refresh, cause I
It's
started.
got to refresh.
There
You
are
have,
two screens.
you have to
One
refresh.
said test and the
I'm refreshing. I understand the concept. Here we go, live now. I'll go to that one.
Actually, you're not going to see anything on live stream anyway, so.
Oh, okay.
We thought we'd see you.
At some point, you might see Bill O'Brien.
Yes.
Don't need it at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
it's way up here.
So far.
Wayne, put your phone on mute, please.
Hey,
Raj, would you please tell me when it's 1 o'clock?
I will.
It is 1 o'clock. 12:59, I guess.
He's building bridges.
You know, they can hear you. This is not on mute. No. Okay, Mr. Chairman, all yours. It's 1 o'clock.
Welcome to the Public Service Commission meeting of March 18th, 2020. Our thanks to Governor Carney, the Secretary of State Jeff Bullock, Dr. Barua, and staff for this opportunity to meet by teleconference, which advances the cause of good health for all the attendees. Our thoughts and prayers and best wishes go out to all people worldwide who have and will contract the coronavirus. The reading of the meeting minutes of February 19th, 2020. Does any commissioner have any changes or corrections to those minutes? If not, may we please have a motion?
So moved.
Commissioner,
I seconded.
You don't know who did that.
Hold on,
Is
we
there
have,
any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, we didn't get who seconded.
Kim?
I made the motion, this is Kim, I made the motion, and I believe Commissioner Correa seconded.
Yes, that is correct.
Mr. Chair, for the record, Commissioner Gray has joined the meeting.
Thank you, sir. For our subsequent motions, when you want to make a motion, say your name, Commissioner Drexler, make your motion, and whoever seconds, say your name and second it. That way, it'll be clear as to what's, who's done what, helped our secretary out. Gosh, I guess we have a motion and a second, and there's no discussion apparently, so all those in favor of approval of the meeting minutes of February 19th, signify by saying aye.
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 Gray is
Are
on.
there any opposed? Are there any abstentions? The motion carries. The consent agenda. Does any commissioner wish to have any of the consent agenda items taken off the list?
Move that we adopt the consent agenda as presented. Conaway.
Commissioner Gray, seconds.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Are there any abstaining? The motion carries. The regular agenda, item number, I guess it's item number 1. In the matter of the application of Artesian Water Company Incorporated in the town of Frankfurt for approval of an asset purchase agreement. And we should have, Mr. Stefan, Mr. O'Brien present. Mr. Stefan, are you there?
Dave Spake, from the Artesian Water will be, presenting today. This is Dave.
Please proceed, please. Proceed, please.
Oh, okay, sorry. Artesian, brings before the commission today a section 2 filing, for approval of a transaction, that includes the town of Frankfurt, for its water assets, that include well supply facilities, water treatment facilities, and tax parcels, all listed in the documentation there. We've reviewed the staff memo, regarding the application. We agree, with their findings and recommendations. We also have read the order, agree with the order and its findings as well. Further, Artesian expects to keep the town's current rates in effect until such time that Artesian connects a system to the town, which we are currently working on, and will return to the commission for that approval at such time. And with that, in an effort to keep it brief, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Spade. Mr. O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Bill O'Brien on behalf of staff. Staff agrees with Mr. Spake's summary of the application and proposed order number 9558. Staff does ask that you enter order 9558, which would approve to the extent necessary under 26 Del C 215 the proposed transaction. As Mr. Spate explained, it would also keep in effect the rates that had been approved by the town of Frankfurt until that time that Artesian comes in and seeks a change to those rates. And it also transfers the service territory from Frankfurt to Artesian. So again, the staff would ask that you enter proposed order 9558.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Commissioners, do you have any questions?
Commissioner Conaway, moves that we enter order number 9558 as presented.
Commissioner Kalia, I second it.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve proposed order number 9558, signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Are there any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Spate and Mr. O'Brien. Number 2, in the matter of the application of Delaware Power and Light Company for an increase in natural gas base rates. And I believe we have Mr. Geddes who's going to kick this one off.
I'm sorry, say that again, Ron?
I think you're going to be the one who's going to describe this application to us.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's Bill O'Brien. No?
Well, I'm staff counsel. This is a application that was filed by Delmarva Power and Light Gas Division. So if a representative from Delmarva Power is here, I would suggest that they kick it off.
I think that's a good idea as well.
This is Pam Scott here on behalf of Delmarva Power.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Winslow and Commissioners. This is the order to open the docket in Delmarva's base rate case for gas. The application was filed on February 21st, 2020. This order, in addition to opening the docket, appoints the hearing examiner for the matter. It grants the request to waive certain minimum filing requirements, establishes the timeline for leave to intervene, and implements rates as of September 21st with probation and subject to refund. We have reviewed the form of order that was prepared by staff, and we have no issues with it and would request that the commission approve this order.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Do you have anybody from staff?
Yes, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, Bill O'Brien on behalf of staff. Yes, staff agrees with Ms. Scott's summary of the order and would ask that the commission enter order 9563. As Ms. Scott said, we did work with the company on the language for the order, and it was also circulated to the public advocate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Commissioners, do you have any questions?
Commissioner Gray moves that we adopt order number 9563 as submitted.
Commissioner Drexler, I second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the motion and opening order number 9563, please signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Scott, Mr. O'Brien. Number 3 is in the matter of the petition of the staff of the Delaware Public Service Commission and the Delaware Public Advocate for approval of revisions to Delmarva Power and Light Company's electric tariff. I think we have a petition from staff and DPA. And if I recall correctly, we have a motion for consolidation, I believe, by Delmarva Power and Light. And then we also received in the mail opposition to that consolidation by staff and DPA. Is there anything else we need to consider in this particular matter? I think that's all. So I guess Delmarva Power and Light is the, no, I'm sorry, the petition is by staff and by DPA. So, Mr. Dennis, are you going to start this one?
I defer to Mr. Slater, the DPA.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The issue addressed in the petition before you has been a problem for several months, since at least the beginning of January, due to the Associated Press article on December 30th and the Gigglebugs complaint. I give Mr. Spinks of Gigglebugs tremendous credit. He said throughout that he was concerned for himself, but also for the others that may be affected. And while the DPA tried to resolve the issue, in his case, it ended up with a formal resolution by this commission more than 2 years after Mr. Spinks first contacted me. As you may recall, the Gigglebugs complaint was about the definition of usage, and Mr. Spinks acknowledged that he had not been financially harmed, but that he could be harmed if this issue was not corrected. The petition before you today for your consideration is on behalf of consumers who we believe have been harmed, and that those that are, and on behalf of those that are not aware of the term tariff or rate classification, because neither term is ever explained to the customer, nor is it on Delmarva's bills. These customers do not know, nor would they know, how to request a lower rate. The difference in customer charge alone for small general service and medium general service is $59.46 per month, or $713.52 per year. That's the easy math. With the increased calls, it was the DPA and staff that began questioning how many customers qualify for different rate classification on February 6th, formalizing that in an email to the company. There are 5,000 of 14,000 of MGS customers to qualify for the SGS rate. As I mentioned before, the customer charge alone is a substantial difference, not to mention the removal of demand charges. There are 200 of 400 of the LGS customers who qualify for MGS. The difference in customer charge there is $132.61 per month, or $1,591.32 per year. And not to mention the other categories on the bill, which actually could increase. There is a possibility that the kilowatt charge may be higher under the lower rate classification, but I have not found an example where that's more than the $132.61 quote savings. In talking with Delmarva over this period, they use the term "works both ways," and I love this term, and I hope that they see that this petition works both ways. Our petition asks you to make it automatic to switch back to the lower rate classification because it's already automatic to move up rate classifications. In addition, it works both ways by ensuring the date occurs not upon when the meter was changed, but when the customer qualifies for a different rate classification. These are equitable solutions. We've heard from Delmarva Power, and, the first thing that they want is to consolidate this in the rate case, which would be, waiting 12 months and not refunding or notifying customers or otherwise changing the current process. Since we filed this petition, I've been in contact with several customers. One customer told me he called Delmarva with questions regarding his bill. Delmarva later clarified these as questions about the balance, due date, and payment. But this inquiry never prompted a discussion by Delmarva's customer service representatives about rates or whether the customer may have qualified for a lower rate classification. Again, how would a customer know to ask such a question? Delmarva's ratepayers have paid millions upon millions for Delmarva to educate its customers, for AMI meters, for a new billing system. Yet if the customer doesn't ask the right question, they can't enter that door. This is similar to the explanation we received multiple times about energy advisors. We've been told a customer must request to speak with an energy advisor, yet how would they know Delmarva has such people? Let me address meter switching very quickly. I had mentioned it earlier. The company claims that meters need to be switched for a customer going from MGS to SGS service. But the company has yet to proffer a logical reason why, given that AMI was supposed to take care of something like this with automatic switching. The company's answer at one point was that the card needed to be switched for billing purposes, yet we see errors there. Furthermore, we asked why SGS customers cannot read, why SGS meters cannot read kilowatt demand when customers are billed by kilowatt for their transmission supply charge. There's been no answer to that question.
Mr. Slater,
Yep.
Mr. Slater, I
Yeah.
apologize for the interruption. Would everybody listening on this teleconference please hit the mute button? We're getting some feedback from one or more people on the teleconference. My apologies, Mr. Slater, please continue.
No, thank you. I thought that might have been me there for a second. So I talked about meters. Let me talk about billing for a second. A church, and they're impacted by this too, said the church's electric bill has been in dispute without a resolution for nearly a year. They received an outstanding balance for $12,000 with no explanation. This was Delmarva's response, and I quote, "The customer's meter was exchanged in August of 2017 due to a rate change request. The meter was exchanged. However, the programming in the billing system did not accurately update. The customer visited DPL in April 2019 following the adjustment as the account showed $9,000 outstanding balance. A business account specialist intervened on the customer's behalf, and he noticed that due to the inaccurate programming, the demand readings did not appear to be accurately recorded. So this business account specialist advocated on the customer's behalf to ensure the billing was updated to reflect more inline demand readings, which resulted in a credit to the customer. Unfortunately, the billing was updated, but the coding in the billing system was still not accurate, and the corrections made were again changed by the billing system. The customer was then advised that this issue, was that Delmarva was working to resolve the coding errors, and that this is a one-off situation and the account is being watched. End quote. With an updated billing system, errors are occurring in net metering and rate classification requests because apparently the billing system was upgraded but only allows manual adjustments at this time. So I have to ask, what are customers getting for these millions of dollars? But after the meter was switched, a different customer is still being billed on medium general service and has not received a credit, even though Delmarva said, and I quote, "Once the exchange is complete, I will have billing adjust the current bill at the SGS rate," end quote. This billing is now being estimated, which is another issue, but not one that was addressed in this rate case. Since 2001, and I'm getting there, the only year in which estimations of longer than 12 months or more than 2019, estimations of more than 4 months have increased for customers, even with AMI, the new billing system, and other new technologies. Make no mistake, we've tried to resolve these issues amicably. We've tried for months, but the company's response has shifted the blame to the customers that they should know the tariff, but the company itself doesn't know what its own tariff says, because, for example, the company highlighted part of their tariff for me in one of our cases, and it says, when 2 or more service classifications are available for the same class of service, the customer shall select the service classification to be applied. Yet the company said, and I quote, "Drew, MGS was the existing rate for this premise. Customers inherit what the previous customer's rate was," end quote. Further, Mr. McGowan states in his electric rate case testimony, for succession customers where a customer is moving into an existing facility that was previously occupied, Delmarva Power automatically assigns the new customer to the same service classification as the predecessor customer at that location, unless a customer requests to change different service classification. That seems like a direct violation of its tariff. The customer is supposed to choose, always. But that's not what Delmarva did here, and there's more than one customer that's occurred to. That's also not what Delmarva did for this other customer, who after a tenant moved out put service in its name at the commercial building. The customer was charged the MGS rate classification of the previous tenant. The building was empty. Delmarva didn't ask what the customer was going to use the building for to assess usage or help the customer select the appropriate rate classification. The customer ended up terminating service at that building because of the cost. Then, in December of 2019, the customer started making calls to Delmarva about getting the meter changed to a non-demand type meter. This is what the customer says, this is when I talked with not just a customer service person, but her supervisor. She indicated she would take care of the meter change and credit me for the overcharge, end quote. The customer was not changed. Their meter was still on MGS until earlier this month. To my knowledge, no credit has been applied, and this is the customer again. The last conversation with the customer service person was on March the 5th of this year. At that time, the customer service person was waiting for the supervisor that she contacted to get back to her with an answer, still waiting. This is one last page. Another person called about rate classification, was put on hold, transferred to 3 different people, and told someone from Retail Choice would call within 24 hours, which did not occur. When she did speak with someone about lowering the bill, no one knew what she was talking about. She said to me, and this is a direct quote, "It was interesting to find out that I might not be getting the best rate, but I cannot do anything. I cannot reach anybody at Delmarva Power, so unless I know who to call or how to question this being aware that there may be a problem is not much help to me," end quote. I like to use the analogy of a cable company, which Mr. McGowan picked up and used in his testimony. If your bill is high with the cable company, you call them and ask them why your bill is high.
Drew, could you slow down?
Yeah, sure, sorry.
Could you repeat that last sentence?
Sure, sorry.
I would like to use the analogy.
Yeah, I like to use the analogy of a cable company, which Mr. McGowan picked up and used in his testimony. If your bill is high with the cable company, you call them and ask why your bill is high. They'll typically lower your bill, or they face the customer switching to another provider. Delmarva customers don't have that luxury because they're captive customers. And when they call to question a high bill, that doesn't prompt a discussion about rate classification. You have to specifically ask, do I qualify for different rate classifications? That is a tremendous burden on small businesses and even to larger customers. The responses from Delmarva that the customer should have called about the rate classification is unacceptable to me. That's why we're asking you to approve this petition, which works both ways, and not delay action to the detriment of these customers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Slater. Who is representing Delmarva Power and Light on this matter?
I am Chair Winslow Pam Scott.
Please proceed.
Staff would like to be heard. Jim Geddes. Thank you.
Would you like me to proceed, or would you like Mr. Geddes to comment?
Maybe we're gonna go with Mr. Geddes, that way you can address both of them.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I'll be very brief. If you look at paragraph 9 of the petition, the joint petition, you'll see that this is not just a few customers, but approximately 5,000 MGS customers and 200 LGS customers, I believe by the company's own admission, are paying more in rates every month than they should, since they qualify for a lower rate classification without demand charges, at least with regard to the MGS customers. The Jigglebugs case is illustrative of how long it took us to resolve that particular issue. And I think that this is an issue of immediacy. And at the moment, there's no incentive for Delmarva to resolve these cases more quickly. And so as the commission listens to Ms. Scott on behalf of the company on its motion to consolidate, I think the urgency of this has been demonstrated by Mr. Slater in his comments. This is something that needs to be resolved now, not in 7 or 9 months. And I think it is staff and the DPA's position that there has to be a more expeditious way to address this issue rather than in a rate filing before you. Thank you. I would like to reserve a little time to respond to Ms. Scott after she addresses her motion to consolidate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Geddes. Ms. Scott.
Thank you, Chair Winslow and Commissioners. As you know, Delmarva filed a motion to consolidate in response to the staff and DPA joint petition on March 13th, 2020. First and foremost, I would like to state that the company is certainly sensitive to this matter and wants to resolve it sooner rather than later. But we also want to emphasize that this is a complicated issue and not as simple as moving a few customers to a new rate class. What makes this issue complicated is the volume of customers that may be eligible to move and the implications such a movement will have on the company and its customers if not executed in a thoughtful and orderly fashion. Therefore, Delmarva wants to take the time needed to get it right. In connection with the customers in question, Delmarva has been following the provisions of its tariff. Those provisions have been in effect since at least 1999 and were approved by the Commission. No Delmarva customers have been overcharged or improperly billed, as DPA acknowledged in its response to the motion. The rates that have been applied are those approved by the Commission in Delmarva's last electric rate case. In following its provisions of its tariff, Delmarva is not receiving more revenues than were approved by the Commission in the last rate case. This is not about revenues being earned by the company. It's about how those revenues are allocated between customer classes and the rate design based upon certain factors, including the number of customers in each rate class. Because this is about allocation of revenues, the matter is not prone to a quick fix or a knee-jerk reaction. It will inevitably be short-sighted and very likely have unintended consequences for other Delmarva customers if we don't take the required measures to determine the appropriate important to understand all the facts and implications so an informed decision can be made and executed in a thoughtful and orderly fashion. To automatically move customers to a different rate class and provide for quote-unquote credits, as the joint petition proposes, subverts traditional rate-making principles and is tantamount to retroactive rate making. The company discussed with staff and DPA the current process required to change a commercial customer to a different rate class, which includes a technician to exchange the meter at the customer's premises. Until an automated solution to change commercial customer rate classification can be programmed and tested as proposed by the company, staff and DPA suggestions to change all the commercial customers immediately will disrupt it to the company and may be costly for customers as well. Our system is currently set up to mirror what is required by the tariff. In order to change that, we need to make specific provisions with respect to our metering and our billing system. We have not been ignoring this issue. To the contrary, we've been spending a significant amount of time carefully analyzing the different aspects of the issue, including validating the number of customers potentially impacted, and I would like to note the 5,000 number and the 200 number. Those are potentially eligible. We have not said that all of those customers would actually be eligible to be changed to a different rate classification. We would also need to evaluate the potential rate impact to other residential and commercial customers, and therefore need to work on a comprehensive plan to appropriately address the matter in a very orderly manner. That is why we deliberately outlined a path forward in our electric base rate case application, which we filed on March the 6th. The application was in fact filed 4 days before the joint petition was filed, and in addition, representatives from Delmarva met with staff and DPA on March 3rd to review the proposed filing, including the company's very specific plans for addressing this matter. The company specifically proposes to have its plan implemented in October, regardless of whether a final decision is made in the current rate case. Staff and DPA imply in their comments that it will take 12 months to get to that point, which is not accurate. As I said, we need adequate time to allow the parties to understand the implications to all customers and to evaluate whether the commercial rate class parameters should be modified based on the cost shifts to other customers, and for the company to make the necessary revisions to its billing system and metering processes so as to be able to automatically reclassify customers where warranted. In the meantime, as customers contact us, we are working with them to gather the proper information and to change their rate classification where warranted, effective as of the next meter read date, which coincides with the scheduled meter exchange. In addition to the meter exchange for customers being reclassified, we need to close out the current rate schedule, obtain full usage, and add the customer to the new rate schedule. Since this matter was publicized, the company has received calls from approximately 33 commercial customers, of which 12 were eligible to be reclassified, and the company is currently working to move those customers to their new rate classification. We are not in violation of our tariff as it relates to new customers. New customers are assigned to service classification based on the information that is made available by the customer at the time that the call is initiated. It's simply not the case, as the public advocate suggests, that every time a new customer moves into an existing space, there are 2 rate places available. Tariff Leaf 16 of the electric tariff does provide that when 2 or more service classifications are available for the same class of service, the customer shall select the service classification to be applied. It also indicates in subsection D that the company, upon request, shall assist the customer in the selection of the most advantageous service classification, but the duty and responsibility of making the selection shall at all times rest with the customer. Again, we are following the provisions of our tariff, the provisions that have been approved by the Commission. To the extent that there is agreement that the provisions of the tariff need to be revised, we are certainly happy to work with DPA and staff in order to do that. But as I indicated previously, it is going to take us some time to get to that point. We again need to validate the numbers. We need to make certain revisions to our billing system to accommodate whatever changes may be needed. So the fact that the staff and DPA may want this matter to be addressed sooner than the time frame that we propose should not be the basis for opening a separate proceeding. This matter needs to be addressed comprehensively as part of the company's rate case and specifically its rate design so as to properly allocate the cost to the proper class of customers. This issue cannot be resolved in a vacuum. Opening two separate dockets to address the same issue involving the same witnesses, the same experts, the same data is a waste of resources and is inefficient. In addition, the information needed to adequately evaluate the implications of the proposed change will come from the pending rate case process. For these reasons, we respectfully request that the Commission consolidate this petition with the electric base rate case application, where these issues and their impacts can be addressed comprehensively and efficiently. And I'd like to reserve time for rebuttal if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Mr. Geddes?
Mr. Slater, do you want to go first, or would you like me to go first?
I'm happy to go first, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
If that's all right with the commissioners. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, there are so many comments that I have, and I'm going to try and keep them brief. Ms. Scott says, she wants to do this sooner rather than later, but in a rate case, we all know that rate cases take 10 to 12 months. I've already pointed out how I find that to be unacceptable. They talk about cost of service. If 5,200 customers called the company today, they would have to change them because the tariff says so, assuming that they qualify. And, perhaps most egregious is it seems like the company is saying that billing and metering only works one way, that it works to be automatic as a rate increase, going up to a different rate classification, but that it can't work the other way unless we spend what will presumably be an exorbitant amount of money to make it work to the benefit of customers. That is what I find to be the most egregious, is that it is somehow automatic to go up, but not automatic to go down. And lastly, they talk about the tariff. When you talk about existing customers, and Ms. Scott pointed this out, as in Section C, which we've already highlighted, when two or more rate classifications are available for the same class of service, the customer shall select the service classification to be applied. In Section D, as Ms. Scott pointed out, the selection shall at all times rest with the customer. But again, Delmarva has said, and indeed it is in their own testimony, that for succession, and I quote, for succession customers, where a customer is moving into an existing facility that was previously occupied, Delmarva Power automatically assigns the new customer to the same service classification as the predecessor customer at the location unless a customer requests to change to a different service classification. It says unless the customer requests, but the tariff says shall at all times rest with the customer. It is a direct violation of their tariff that existing building customers are placed on a higher rate classification. In fact, some of them have been on it for years, and they deserve relief. Thank you.
Mr. Slater or Mr. Geddes, I think that the main object of Ms. Scott's comment was to indicate that a consolidation would be more economical, more synergies, and less time, effort, and work, and perhaps money involved. So would someone please address, rather than the merits of the case, someone address that issue?
Yes, I'll be happy to, with Mr. Slater's permission, James Geddes on behalf of staff. Historically, we have pulled issues out of rate cases for particular reasons. Normally, rate design, in some cases, takes longer. I can recall in the 1980s, we used to separate the two issues out because one would take longer than the other. In this case, we're actually asking the opposite where we believe this rate design issue, if you would like to characterize it that way, needs to be focused on immediately. As you all well aware, staff and the DPA have different witnesses for revenue requirements and rate design. And in essence, what we're asking is that the commission deal with this petition on an expedited basis with the appropriate consultants and not duplicate it in the rate case. The advantages to this is that it will be resolved by the time, hopefully, the rate case is before you. Whatever recommendations could be incorporated therein if not done before, and it would incentivize the company to address this sooner rather than later. Let me just suggest that there is another way to go forward with this, and that would be to bring some kind of action under 310, because the rate classification of MGS clearly is not consistent with the overall revenue requirement. If, as established, there are more than 5,000 or approximately 5,000 customers that are mischaracterized, then that rate classification is bringing additional revenues into the company that should not be under that rate classification. We certainly understand that there will be adjustments for other rate classifications. However, those customers are paying more than they should. They are not going to get refunds. They are continuing to pay more than they should under the tariff if they qualify for the SGS. So the incentives are not with Delmarva to fix this as soon as possible, but with staff and the DPA to try to get some resolution of it. As the petition states, and this is my last point, the company spent $72 million on AMI, which was supposed to be seamless, i.e. whatever the demand, whatever the usage was at a customer's location, that information could easily and efficiently be generated and submitted to the company. But to now say that, the meters only read in one direction and that you have to have a different meter for demand than you do for general, these are issues that are a surprise to staff and I think DPA. We need to get to the bottom, so we need to get there quickly. And so I think it is more efficient to pull this issue out of the general case, have specific experts address it, and be ready to recommend to the commission early implementation of some results, or in fact, put these rates on a temporary basis subject to refund. But customers need assistance, and they need it now, not in 6 to 9 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gillis. Ms. Scott?
Thank you, Chair Winslow. I too will attempt to be very brief. In terms of the issue of billing and metering only working one way, as I said in my original comments, the billing and metering is set up to work in sync with how the tariff reads. So to the extent that we are going to change how the tariff reads, we would need to revise the billing system to make those changes, and we would also need to revise how the metering works. And despite what staff and DPA would potentially lead you to believe, AMI is not a be-all to end-all. It is a platform that serves as a network for all kinds of uses. However, like any network, it needs to have the necessary program in place to address specific functions. Therefore, while it has lots of capabilities, those capabilities do not come into play until they are properly programmed. In terms of commercial customer classification, it is one of Delmarva's identified goals, in fact, for 2020 to program the system to enable seamless moves for these customers where warranted without the need for a meter exchange. But to say that by the Commission approving the implementation of AMI, it automatically equates to Delmarva having unlimited functionality with the press of a button is completely overstating how AMI works and shows a lack of understanding of the technology. We are not in violation of our tariff. We are working with customers, customers that move into existing facilities. They may be considered to be classified the same. We certainly ask information from them as to how they should be classified. If they can provide classification have as much of an incentive as the DPA and staff have to make sure that we get this right for our customers. But as I said when I started my comments, we want to do it right the first time. We don't want to do some type of a knee-jerk reaction to what has been raised, only to find out 3 months from now that there are additional unintended consequences that we will have to further address. We certainly want to get this done before the conclusion of the rate case, but there is a lot of information associated with the rate case that is relevant to this particular process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Commissioners, do you have any questions of the party?
Commissioner Gray, I have a few questions, Mr. Chair, please. So from what I've heard, I too believe it's hard to imagine that the company is capable of moving customers automatically up and not automatically down in rate classification. But for clarification, I heard a couple of things I'd like to make sure I heard properly. If the staff's petition is adopted, does this mean that ratepayers held in the wrong classification will be entitled to refunds? I have one other question once I get some feedback on that one.
Commissioner Gray, I'm happy to try and address that question. I think it's a simple answer. Those customers would not, in my opinion, be subject to a refund. However, the customers who were automatically placed in a service classification, that may be a different issue that needs to be addressed.
So if I hear you correctly, these customers that you indicate are perhaps in a wrong rate classification today will continue to pay in that rate classification with no subject opportunity for a refund. Okay.
This is correct, and in conversations with Delmarva Power previously, this was one of the reasons, one of the impetuses that this petition was so immediately necessary, is that these customers are not aware that they can change service classification, but they also would not be subject to any refunds unless they, and you know, the only way they can change is if they ask a specific question. It's not a general conversation that's had.
I see. So I have one question now for Ms. Scott, please. Does revising the billing system mean replacement or reconfiguration and programming?
Commissioner Gray, if I could ask Kevin McGowan to respond to your question. He's our Vice President of Regulatory Policy and Strategy and is intimately familiar with the billing system.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. So what we're talking about is a reprogramming of an existing system. So it doesn't replace the billing system. It's a new feature that needs to be programmed. We have been able to program over-air reads for net energy meters. That's been successful. And as Ms. Scott mentioned earlier, one of our goals for 2020 is to reprogram it to allow us to do over-air programming for commercial meters. But that needs to be programmed and tested, but not a replacement of the system.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I have no further questions.
I have,
Thank you,
Commissioner.
Go ahead, Commissioner Correa.
Yes, sir, this is Commissioner Karia. I have one question for Ms. Scott, that if 5,000 customers are either overpaid or they are paying over or under, how does it have any connection with the total earning of a company? Because total earnings, top line, is a different, quite a different concept, very broad concept. But if I was one of those 5,000 customers, I would not like for you to take more money from me because some programming is not being done, and or you can say that, well, totally, overall, we are not earning more. That doesn't suit me. How do you explain to a customer, a commercial customer, that they are taking more money from you, there's no chance for you to get refund, but we are earning, overall we are earning okay, we are not over earning as compared to whatever the last case study has given you the directive. So would you please explain me that as a customer?
Sure, Commissioner Correa, and again, I'm going to ask Kevin McGowan to respond to your question.
So, Kevin McGowan, so Commissioner, in a rate case, the amount of revenue requirement is approved by the commission. And then as part of the rate design, based on how the customer count is for each rate class, that revenue is allocated to those customers. And these 5,000 customers that could be eligible for a lower class were in the MGS class, and the rates for all customers were established based on those customer counts. And so the fact that a customer has the opportunity to move to a lower class, we are certainly supportive of doing that, and we don't object to that. Our issue is that it's a large amount of customers, not a few customers, and when you make this kind of a change in the customer count and changes to the rate design, you can have situations where customers have unintended consequences about costs being shifted. And that's what we're saying. We just want the time to make sure everyone understands that if we make this shift, this is what the implications are for customers. But at the end of the day, we just want to really highlight that our approved revenue requirement, we're not over-earning. We are not earning more revenues than we're approved in total. If some customers have a higher rate than they otherwise might be eligible for, it means some customers are not paying what they should be. So we need to make sure that this is a balanced approach.
Mr. Chairman, this is Jim Geddes. Could I respond to that as well as to Commissioner Correa's question? Please. I think it's an important point.
Would you please make your response?
Yes. Well, Dr. Correa asked about basically the 5,000 customers, and in response to an earlier question, that there will be no refunds. So who's at risk here between Delmarva and these 5,000 customers? It's the customers, because until they get their rate classification sorted out, they are paying more than they otherwise should. And as you all know, Delmarva does not earn the return on its capital at a rate that is higher than a risk-free rate. This is a business risk. They have these customers, for whatever reason, without attribution of how they got there, mischaracterized. And these customers are paying this money, which they will never get back. So between the company and the customers, it is the obligation of the utility to fix this as quickly as possible so that the customers who are being affected lose less money than they otherwise would. And that's the point why this needs to be addressed immediately, not in a rate case at the leisure of the company. It needs to be addressed now. And that's what staff and the DPA are asking. The risk is on the customers. It needs to be addressed. Thank you.
May I respond?
It's on petition.
Well, you know, we're repeating ourselves right now. Scott, you want to make another comment?
I simply want to say, as I said at the beginning, this is a very important issue to the company as well. We are addressing it now. We are attempting to verify the exact amount of customers that are impacted by this. Then we need to go from that step to determine what programs need to be reprogrammed to address the issue. There are a number of steps associated with this that we need to follow in order to implement it properly. So we too believe it's an important issue. We too believe it needs to be addressed as quickly as we can. But again, we don't want to rush to doing something that ultimately will have unintended consequences, because at the end of the day, this is a risk to all customers, so we need to get it right.
Mr. Chair, this is Commissioner Gray. Commissioner Gray here.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
One last question for Ms. Scott. So, Ms. Scott, if this petition today is adopted by the commission, when would you envision changes occurring? And if the commission chose to wait until the rate case, what would then be the date you would envision for it to become effective? I want a comparison of those two dates from a DPL perspective, please.
Well, I can tell you that based on our filing in the rate case application and the series of steps that we set forth that need to be followed, we are looking at trying to implement the changes in October. That's based on our analysis of how long we think it's going to take us to do the verifications, the programming, et cetera. So that's approximately 6 months.
And Commissioner Gray, this is Kevin McGowan, just to comment on the process today. So if we were required to change all 5,000 customers today, because of the billing system, and I think Mr. Slater said he was not given a rationale as to why there has to be a meter exchange. It's important to understand when our billing system was designed, and it's designed with financial controls. One of the controls is that the rate class that a customer is assigned must match the meter at their premise. That's just a financial control that we rely on. And because of that, if they change to a different rate class, it requires us to change the meter on the premise to make sure that the billing rate, again, matches the meter at the customer's premise. So if we were required to implement this today, we would have to send out 5,000 technicians to customers. They have to be scheduled at their next meter reading date. It will take several months for them to do that. We have to see if we even have that volume of meters in our shop, or if we have to go out and purchase them. But that would take several months to kind of schedule and to format. Whereas in our application, we are going to be filing an update to our electric rates case in early April, which will lay out the steps. One of them is to automate this whole process so that we can do this in a much more efficient and less costly manner.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Gray again, if I could make just a few comments based on what I've heard.
Please go ahead.
I have a lot of empathy for the customers who may be assigned to the wrong rate class. But as I'm listening to the mechanics and the effective time frames for deployment of new meters to match the control systems and reprogramming, and I put this in now the context of folks who are in large measure quarantined, and we listened to quite an extensive discussion yesterday about what some of the sectors are needing to do with their employees to keep them safe. I guess I'm prepared to acquiesce to DPL's motion and bring this in with rate case. Because I just can't imagine that employees are going to be able immediately to start deploying physically under current circumstances. So those are my comments.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes, sir.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Of the 5,000 plus or minus consumers who are affected in this issue, how many has Delmarva Power and Light processed thus far in the last, say, 30 days?
As Ms. Scott mentioned, I think since the beginning of the month, we had 33 calls from customers, and of those, 12 customers were actually eligible to move down to the SGS rate. And so those customers have been scheduled for a meter exchange at their next billing date.
I heard Ms. Scott say that, but I was hoping that maybe the company took some proactive measures as well and had something beyond the 33 callers.
Mr. Chair, may I make a comment?
Could we respond to Mr. Winslow's question?
Yes, I'd like to have someone respond.
So Chairman, I think first of all, the numbers that we ran were, it was a quick estimate of the customers we think are eligible. In order for us to validate those customers customer and confirm that they in fact are eligible. So we have not done that, and we're in the process of we haven't completed that analysis, but we're in the process now of validating on a customer by customer basis which ones would be eligible.
A question here from Commissioner Drexler, please.
Yes, ma'am, please go ahead.
Okay. My question is for Mr. McGowan, and this question is a customer, for example, is in SGS, but have exceeded the 3,500 kilowatt hours for 2 consecutive months, so then they're bumped up to the MGS automatically. Does that mean that physically that meter at that site is changed so that the customer will now be in MGS for 12 months? And secondly, if that is indeed the fact, do you then go out and reset the meter back to SGS after the 12-month period if the customer is then eligible? Thank you.
Sure. So it's the same process for a customer that goes from an SGS to an MGS class or back. So if an SGS customer exceeds the 3,500 kilowatts in 2 consecutive months, we would send a technician out to the premise. He would have to exchange the meter to an MGS meter at the customer's next billing cycle. And then if the MGS customer goes to an SGS, then again, the technician would have to go out and change the meter back to an SGS. So it's the same process in both.
Thank you.
May I add to that?
Who's that?
This is Drew.
Okay, yes, Mr. Slater.
Thank you. So the customer would only be switched back if the customer asks to be switched back and has to know the buzzwords to be asked. But the 5,200 customers that have been relatively identified, those 5,200 customers could call tomorrow and say, we want to be changed, and Delmarva has to change them, because that's what the tariff said. You know, what you heard from the company was that 33 people have called and 12 qualified. That is because of the outreach that we have done, but Delmarva has not done any outreach to the customers because the customers never get the opportunity to actually talk to a CSR about rate classification unless they specifically use those buzzwords. That implies the problem, part of it anyway.
So this is Kevin again. I'd like to respond to that. I'm sorry.
Okay, listen.
Yeah, permission first,
Mr.
please.
McGowan, this is the last comment, and we're gonna close this up.
All right, thank you, appreciate that, Chairman. I guess on that point, as part of our rate case filing, one of the things that we are proposing is a change to our process that we're committing to review all customers on an annual basis, and then we would identify which customers would be eligible, and then we would notify those customers of their right to be able to move to a different rate class. So as part of our proposal to not only address the current issue, we are looking at changing the process going forward to avoid this issue in the future. And I thought that was important to note.
But nothing happens now.
Commissioners, any more questions? Does anybody have a motion?
I move, this is Commissioner Kavian, I move that we accept the position of the Office of the Public Advocate and the staff, and we reject Delmarva motion to consolidate.
And I will second that motion as Commissioner Conaway.
Is there any discussion on the motion? I would just like to say that I believe that there's considerable merit to a consolidation and resolving issues together in a more economic and thoughtful, as the term I guess Dennis Scott would make. But to be frank with you, what disturbs me is the quantity of people involved, the delay thus far in terms of addressing those individuals, and also the belief that despite the fact that I oppose the consolidation in this particular matter, that if the company or the EPA or the state believes that something could applications that these parties can work together to hopefully make it efficient and thoughtful despite the fact they're gonna go back, on separate rails, so I support the motion. Any other comments? All those in favor of the motion to deny the consolidation signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed signify by saying no.
Commissioner Gray, no.
Are there any abstentions? The motion to deny the consolidation is approved.
Mr. Chair, are you still there?
Thank you.
So, point of clarification, this is Jim Geddes.
Yeah, Jim, go ahead.
So if I understand, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, you have denied the motion to consolidate. I believe that Commissioner Correa's motion was to accept the petition. What is the sense of the commission on the petition of the DPA and staff?
Yes, that is correct. That is my intention. This is Commissioner Kalia. Yes.
Okay, so it's supposed to be with respect to both issues.
So do I understand the sense of the commission was that the petition is granted and the motion to consolidate is denied?
That's my understanding.
That's my understanding.
Yes, Mr. Chair, could we take that vote once again, please?
If you would like to change your vote, please tell the secretary.
Okay, I just want to indicate that I was in favor of the consolidation, not in favor of the petition under current circumstances.
So this is Commissioner Kalia. My motion is not to accept consolidation and to accept the petition of staff and DPA. That is my motion. That was my motion.
Okay, so I voted correctly then.
Okay, so that's resolved, the motion carries, and the two issues are resolved, and we can move forward to the next item. Ms. Scott, Mr. McGowan, thank you so much, I appreciate it. Also, Mr. Slater, Mr. Geddes.
Commissioner Winslow, may I ask a question, please, for clarification?
Yes.
So, if you have approved the petition, that means that you have, approved the request to amend our electric tariff, which requires that certain things be done immediately. And I think we have spent some time indicating that we will need some time to make these changes. I'm unclear as to how we're moving forward at this point.
Mr. Chairman, this is Jim Geddes. I think we will need an order that memorializes the vote, and I think we'll have discussions on that. I believe the next commission meeting is on the 1st, and hopefully we can address and discuss issues about timing.
Yeah, I think that would be important.
So we will work with staff and DPA on the form of order.
Correct. If we plan, I would plan to have it before the commission on the 1st. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The next item on the regular agenda is number 4, which is in the matter of the adoption of rules and procedures to implement the Renewable Energy Portfolio Standards Act, et cetera, regulation document number 56. Now, is Mr. Thompson on the teleconference?
Mr. who? Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Thompson from the Sierra Club, are you on the teleconference?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay. I can hear you. Yes, that's Mr. Thompson?
Yes. This is Aiden.
State your full name for the record.
My name is Dustin Thompson.
Mr. Thompson, we have a time on our agenda known as the public comment session, which is on the agenda, is after the consideration of regulation docket number 56. I don't think any comments you have would be particularly productive for us if we hear them after we've already acted on number 4 of the calendar. And I think people will probably wonder at the beginning, why was I asking for Mr. Thompson? But I believe that you have the right to express yourselves publicly in a public comment. You're not going to be able to participate by asking questions or making any further comments, but we'll give you 2 minutes to tell us what Sierra Club thinks about this particular docket, and then we're going to interrupt you at 2 minutes, and we're going to move on. Okay, Mr. Thompson?
Fair enough, thank you. The Sierra Club really just wanted to make the statement on the record that, given the current COVID-19 pandemic that we're dealing with right now, that we do not think it's really appropriate to take any decisive action on the cap for the freeze. With respect to the docket number 56 in general, the Sierra Club believes that there is an error in the proposed rule and that it does not accurately capture the true cost of compliance with the RPS. And while the cost of renewable energy has actually gone down, which was stated by Delmarva previously, the cost cap calculation that's been put forward has stated that it's expanded exponentially and we believe is going beyond what is delineated in the RPS code specifically, including perhaps the cost of non-RPS related contractual obligations. We also want to put on the record that DENREC and the PSC is required to work collaboratively on determining the cost cap, which is not occurred as of our last understanding. And we believe that the RPS legislation had intended for DENREC to be the authority in making the freezing determination. So given the fact that everybody's aware the legislature is planning on considering RPS legislation this session, should they be able to reconvene, we are requesting formally that in this time of crisis, we give breadth to the process and suspend any conclusive action on this matter until such time that the legislature has an opportunity to act on this critical issue and the public can appropriately engage in the process.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you.
I appreciate your input. Ladies and gentlemen, the number 4 on the calendar is in the matter. Well, I just read this, and we know what it is, regulation docket 56. It starts under A, the staff is to update the commission regarding next steps. We do know, have been informed that the Superior Court ruled in favor of the Public Service Commission's motion with respect to intervention by DENREC. So I guess, Dr. Brewer, would you kindly give us the updates that's mentioned in the subsection A?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and Mr. Commissioners, this is a staff update. I'm not sure how to react to the previous comments, but I'm going to ignore it for now. Staff is asking the commission to reconsider its February 19th vote, which has not been signed yet. On February 24th, 5 days after you took action on February 19th, Superior Court Judge Wharton issued his decision that said DENREC has no standing in the lawsuit related to this docket, and therefore its motion to stay Reg Docket 56 is moot. Therefore, Reg Docket 56 is still in effect. Also, the numbers presented by staff on February 19th in response to the Commission's request were based on incomplete data because DENREC did not provide its numbers and we did not consult with DENREC as required. If we do not produce the numbers correctly, then Commission is violating its own regulations and that is not a precedent. And these are just my policy comments, these are not the legal arguments that Council O'Brien or Council Walsh can give you. Therefore, I request that the commission direct us, its staff, to work with DENREC in the next few months to produce the correct results. Let us revisit this issue and give you an update on the progress of the calculations after June 30th. Those are my brief comments, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
After June 30th is a very, very, very long period of time. You have a more definite period of time?
We would like to, I'm going to look at my staff counsel, Bill O'Brien here.
I just want to clarify, I believe what the chairman meant was that after June 30th is an indefinite time period. If you wanted to put a July 1 or a particular date, then please, I think that is how I'm interpreting the chairman's question.
Right, and I look to my wise counsel, and July 1st would be a better way to put it. Thank you.
Commissioners, any questions?
I have one.
Commissioner.
This is Commissioner Conaway. The figures that were used for the presentation on the 19th of February, I thought they had come from Delmarva.
Yes, but there was a piece missing that is supposed to come from DENREC. So I believe that day, on the 19th, I mentioned it about several times that the numbers were incomplete. However, since you had asked us to produce it, we went ahead and produced it with estimated numbers.
Well, I have a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely, that's why we're here.
Thank you, thank you. This is Commissioner Karia. At one point, at that time also at the last meeting was mentioned by our executive director, and he has just mentioned it again, that the figures were incomplete. Whatever the portion of the figure our staff had might have been correct, but still the other part was missing. And that point, again, rethinking makes a lot of sense. That is good to wait and work with DENREC to get the figure rather than put out incomplete figure, not incorrect, but incomplete figure. And I now believe, after rethinking again, that our motion was based on incomplete figures. We knew that, I knew that as a commissioner. So I think that Dr. Barua's presentation and request not to adopt the resolution, which is not legally adopted, signed, and what have you, is a good one, and I personally like to support that.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Gray, question for the executive. Question for the executive director, please.
Yes, sir.
So I understood your comments about having incomplete figures. I realized 5 days after our order, the court made a decision, which is a change, and we allowed for that, I believe, in the language of the order. My question is, what is it that you know from DENREC that's different, and what is it that you've come to expect in the way of timeframes from DENREC?
Nothing. But we have to have the chance to approach them and discuss this with them. I think if we do not do that and just use the numbers that were produced on February 19th, then we're using incomplete numbers to make a decision, or a decision was made based on incomplete numbers. And I don't think that's a good precedent for commission in the future years. You would be
If that's the case today, and you pick a date, let's say September 1, whatever arbitrary date there is, and you still have no operation from DENREC, are we right in the same position as we are today?
Yes, you would be, except you would have given that opportunity. So if, let's say, we use July 1st as a date here today, instead of saying after June 30th, we're saying give us chance till July 1st to work with them. If they don't produce something by July 1st, if we are unable to, then at least we can come back and tell you we were unable to do it. But right as of now, we never made that approach.
I thought we had.
At that point, because the court case was going on, and I'm looking at Mr. O'Brien here, the lawyers, and Mr. Walsh on the telephone, at that time, I believe because the court case was going on, I don't know the correct word, Mr. O'Brien, you can help me here. You can just speak from there.
All right, this is Bill O'Brien on behalf of staff. I believe what Dr. Barua is trying to say is that when DENREC declined participation in the docket, one of the reasons they gave was because of the ongoing litigation in Superior Court. Certainly, there were prior commission orders that requested or even directed DENREC to comply with the existing regs. But at that time, they declined, in part based on the ongoing litigation and not knowing the outcome of that litigation, which could have resulted in a stay of the regulation. So since the last vote, which has not been memorialized yet, since the last vote, we now know that the stay has been declined, or at least mooted, by the granting of the public advocates and commission's motions to dismiss. So as Dr. Barua stated, now that that reason for not participating is off the table, staff wanted an opportunity, at least, to revisit with DENREC the consultation and the complete set of numbers for the calculation.
Commissioner Gregg and Mr. O'Brien, what is the solution? Is there just a delay in the dates of the order, or does that order get killed altogether?
Well, that would be up to the commission, but certainly the commission could simply amend its vote from before to state a new date. As you recall, the vote from the last meeting delayed the effective date of the declaration of the freeze until June 1st. Based on Dr. Barua's comments, staff is requesting that that date move to July 1st rather than June 1st, which would give ample time for the commission to attempt its collaboration and consultation with DENREC, given the change in circumstances occurred by the decisions from Superior Court. So, to answer your question, Commissioner Gray, we could present to you at the next meeting or even before the next meeting simply a modified order based on Dr. Barua's comments today that would keep the freeze as determined earlier, but simply move the effective date to July 1st to give the parties, or at least staff and DENREC, the chance to revisit this collaboration. And we could have that order.
I'm prepared to make such an order. I mean, a motion.
This is Commissioner Drexler. I would say that given the legislative calendar ends on June 30th, giving the July 1 date really doesn't give enough time for DENREC, who at this point probably won't be responding with numbers until then, but doesn't give DENREC any time after the end of the legislative session. So would a date of August 1st be more appropriate?
I personally, this is Commissioner Karia, I like the August 1 date only because of this emergency corona situation going on, and we don't know how slow or fast the legislature will be, and how much more we and the DENREC will be involved in this situation. So August 1 sounds to be more practical date for this.
Commissioners, I think I've made myself pretty clear over the last 4 or 5 months or so that I want a position, I want a date of July 1st or after, So I also agree with the August 1st date. We've had this unseemly litigation and finger pointing at each other for a long period of time. I hope this is the last time we have it on the calendar. I hope that there's be new legislation and new action going forward and a clean slate. But if not, we do have to pass this in order to proceed ahead in the event the legislation doesn't come through and help fix this issue. So I will be supporting Commissioner Gray's motion as long as it's got an August the 1st date in it.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I move that we amend our order from last month on this matter and reflect the date of August 1st, 2020.
I have a question to ask of, okay, it's second, there's time for a little discussion, we've already had some, but my question is, on the last time we discussed this matter, we enacted a freeze, and I understand why we did. I know, Denrick wasn't cooperating, we felt we had nothing else we could do but to enact the freeze. But I guess my question is will the order that we just finished talking about, it will end the freeze, so to speak. So is that going to be a trouble or a problem? Is that a problem as we go forward? Because if new legislation is passed, obviously we'll have a freeze out there which wouldn't be applicable.
I think, Mr. Chair, a comment from Commissioner Gray. I think that when we passed this order last month, it was stated clearly that unless conditions either at the court or in the legislature change.
Okay, Dr. Brewer, what's the story on the freeze? My worry is that we have that freeze in the language. We have an auction that's supposed to occur at some point in time. We really haven't heard any evidence about what the effect of the freeze is going to have on the auction and all the vendors, buyers and sellers in the auction. So, tell us what impact we're going to have on the practical market.
This is Bill O'Brien on behalf of staff. Mr. Chairman, the way I understand the motion would not affect the declaration of the freeze. It would just postpone it from June 1st to August 1st, with the caveat certainly that if there's legislation that occurs prior to then that affects the commission's freeze determination, its authority to make the determination, or the calculations that go into the determination, that we would revisit before August 1st. If you are now asking whether we should, or whether the commission should consider killing the freeze altogether, I would have to say that staff is not prepared to give answers based on your questions around market impacts, and I would question whether Delmarva or any type of solar industry representative would be available to answer those questions. So staff is certainly satisfied or would be happy to move forward with an amended vote from last time that simply moves the effective date from June 1st to August 1st with some additional language about the Superior Court decisions that came out after the last vote.
And also additional language indicating that if there's legislation that changes the scenario, that the Public Service Commission would readdress the whole issue.
Very good.
I know, Commissioner Gray, is that with your approval of your motion?
Absolutely.
Commissioners, this is Gary Myers. I wonder if I could chime in.
Yes, sir.
Just 2 points.
Give me a regulation 56 document without your comment.
I'll try to make I can tell which way the wind's blowing here, so I'll try to make it brief. One is as to the omitted information. As you remember, it's the calculations of the green fund expenditures by DENREC that staff did not have. As Ms. Knotts and Mr. O'Brien indicated to you at the 19th meeting, if you plug those numbers in
Mr. Myers?
Yes.
Yes. What happened with your Freedom of Information Act request?
I lost, which is another thing I'd like to make a request for after all this discussion is over.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Westwood, this is Dawn Crompton for Delmarva.
Yes, ma'am, go ahead. Yes.
Thank you. I'm wondering if Pam Knopf is on the call today?
This is Pam Knotts. Yes, I'm available in the room.
Hi, Pam. So I just wanted to dovetail a little bit on Mr. Meyer's comments with regard to the beginning of the compliance year. And I understand in the past, Delmarva has submitted its RPS compliance report in September, and we intended to do that, I believe, for this year as well. So I'm not certain, and regrettably, I'm not able to speak directly on the issue of the impact of the August 1 deadline. So I didn't know, Pam, if you, Ms. Knopf, if you felt that that would be workable considering the beginning of the compliance year, or if you felt that the August 1 date would interrupt the process.
It's,
Actually, this would just be my opinion, but I don't think that 2 months into it would really interrupt the process. But of course, you know, Delmarva, you may have other feelings, but I'm, you know, you're hedged in long-term contracts for SRECs and RECs, so those long-term contracts are still in effect. So it's basically spot market purchases.
Chair Winslow, it's Glenn Moore. Would you like me to comment on this?
Yes, please.
So I think Pam is correct. When you had the wisdom to go ahead and make the potential freeze 2019-2020, that obviously got us through May 31st. I appreciate the concern, but I think if by August 1st Delmarva knew whether there was a freeze or whether there was new legislation that allowed us to move forward, I think that would give us time to meet the obligations for 21-22 or 2021, and certainly potentially be able to have an auction late in this calendar year, early next year. So I think the August 1 date would work fine.
Mr. O'Brien, with respect to legislation, if legislation is passed and signed by the governor,
Mr. Chairman, we're losing you. We lost you after Mr. O'Brien.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Will the Public Service Commission staff act with, quickly if there is legislation passed by the legislature on this issue?
Yes, sir, we will.
Emphatically, yes.
And can't this matter be placed on the calendar for the first or second meeting in July for purposes of review to make sure that we proceed ahead with in coordination with DENREC or whoever else we have to coordinate with in the event legislation is not passed?
Sure, we will bring it for review on the first meeting in July.
Commissioners, any further questions? Okay, Harold, I think, does everybody understand the motion? Especially Mr. O'Brien?
Yes, sir.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. The next item we have is, and thank you, Mr. Thompson, if you're still there. Next item we have is the hearing schedule. And we have the, in the matter of the rules for the provision of telecommunication services. And do we have someone from Verizon here to make a presentation?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, Doug Smith is here.
Thank you.
Smith, my goodness, I can't believe that. Is that the Doug Smith I think it is?
Yes, it is, sir.
Well, welcome. Welcome, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Doug Smith, Vice President, State Government Affairs for Verizon. Verizon submitted comments in support of the Commission's proposed regulations in dockets 10, 41, and 45. We submitted those comments back on February 4th, 2020. I would like to have them moved into the record for this proceeding, and basically, in summary, Verizon fully supports the regulatory changes proposed by the orders, numbers 9506 and 9532, such that the regulations may be kept current and consistent with existing law. And that's all I have in the way of any formal comments, Mr. Chairman.
The exhibits are entered, I believe, without any objection. I haven't heard any objections. Mr. O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Bill O'Brien on behalf of Commission staff. And I'd like to thank Mr. Smith for summarizing the procedural posture of the case and for submitting the comments, which were supportive of staff's proposed regulation. So correct, certainly staff does not object to marking and entering into the exhibit of this proceeding, into the record of this proceeding as Exhibit 1, the Verizon comments. And as a preliminary matter, staff would also ask that the Commission marks and enters into the record of this proceeding as Exhibit 2 the affidavits of publication of notice signifying that notice of this evidentiary hearing was published in the News Journal and in the Delaware State News on January 23rd, 2020.
So admitted.
Thank you. So as you know, this matter came before the Commission first on December 5th, 2019, and then again on January 8th, 2020. The latter order simply moved the hearing date from the February Commission meeting, which was canceled, to today's Commission meeting. So today, as Mr. Smith indicated, we're here to conduct the evidentiary hearing on the proposed regulation. And I do have one witness with some brief comments, and if it please the Commission, I would ask that the court reporter swear in the witness, Ms. Driggins.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Ms. Driggins, would you please state your name and business address for the record?
Sure. My name is Lisa Driggins, and I'm employed by the Delaware Public Service Commission, and my business address is 861 Silver Lake Boulevard, Suite 100, Dover, Delaware, 19904.
And what is your position with the Commission?
I am a public utility analyst for the Commission.
And would you please describe your professional background?
Sure. I received a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Management in 1998 and an MBA in 2003 from Wesley College.
Thank you. Would you please describe the purpose of your testimony?
Sure. The purpose of my testimony, okay. On April 17, 2019, the governor of the state of Delaware signed House Bill 18. House Bill 18 makes changes and technical corrections to the Commission's authority regarding telecommunication regulations. The Public Service Commission authority over telecommunication public utility companies have been changed by recent decisions by the Federal Communications Commission and legislation enacted in Delaware. The bill changes statutory requirements for the PSC regulated telecommunication public utility companies to remove requirements that are no longer consistent with the FCC decisions.
And could you please summarize the proposed changes?
The changes now permit telecommunication carriers to undergo transfers of control and issue securities without Commission's approval. The changes also narrow the definition of basic service under the Telecommunication Technology Investment Act to only switched access services to allow carriers to change rates for basic service without Commission approval.
And did staff cause to be published public notice of the proposed changes as well as the the evidentiary hearing that we're holding today?
Yes, they were published in the Delaware State News and the News Journal on January 23rd, 2020, and also published in the January 2020 edition of the Delaware Register of Regulations.
And did you receive and review any comments from the public or any other person concerning this proceeding?
Yes, Verizon filed comments in favor of the new regulation.
And in staff's view, are the proposed regulations, would adoption of the proposed regulations be in the public interest?
Yes.
And what is your recommendation regarding the proposed regulation?
Staff recommends that the commission adopt the proposed regulations for the reason listed above.
And does this conclude your testimony in the proceeding?
It does, yes.
Ms. Driggins is available for questions from the commissioners or from the other participant in the proceeding, Verizon Delaware.
Are there any questions? Sounds like Lisa did a great job and there's no questions.
Very good. Again, this is Bill O'Brien. I will explain that we do not have a proposed order adopting the regulation today because, as you're probably aware, the APA requires that when an agency does hold a hearing on a proposed regulation, the public comment period must be kept open for 20 days beyond that hearing. So when a hearing examiner conducts the hearing, we don't have any timing issues regarding the commission's action and an order. But today, since the commission conducted the hearing directly, we do have an additional 20 minutes on the comment period. Once that has expired, we will bring an order before the commission proposing to finally adopt the regulations. But it would certainly be appropriate now if the commission so chooses to take a vote on whether to adopt the regulations, and we'll come back beyond 20 days to let you know if there was any further public comment.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Commissioners, any motion? Mr. O'Brien, I move exactly what you said. Is there a second?
Second.
Drexler, second.
Any discussion on the motion to approve the changes to the telecommunications regulation, subject to the 20-day public comment period? No questions, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you, Ms. Driggins and Mr. O'Brien.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you.
I believe the next item on the agenda is the public comments. We've already had Mr. Thompson speak. Is there anyone else who's called in or is present who likes to make some comments to the Public Service Commission? Dr. Brewer, Director's comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, I'll be brief. The public comment session in PSC docket number 19-0314, Verizon Delaware LLC renewable of cable TV franchise, which was to be held on March 24th at 6 p.m. in the Gilliam building in Newcastle, Delaware, has been canceled because that building has shut down. It'll be rescheduled at some point. Evidentiary hearing in PSC docket number 19-0724, Chesapeake Utilities Corporation's environmental rider is going to be held on Wednesday, April 1st at 1 p.m. here in our building in Cannon Building Suite 100 in Dover. The next commission meeting is on April 1st, and we are trying to see if we can have a consent agenda so that we can get it done rapidly. As I reported to you before, things are evolving, as you know, every day. Just so you know, the Cabinet Secretary has been meeting with all his division directors every other day, and most of our staff is on teleworking status right now. Excuse me. With that, I have no other comments unless you have any questions for me, Commissioners.
Any questions for Dr. Brewer?
This is Commissioner Drexler. Dr. Burrow, quick question. How will we sign any of the orders for today? Will that be done remotely, online, or?
No, it has to be inked, and I will be driving around the state and getting your signatures very soon.
We'll see you soon.
Wait a minute, are you gonna keep a 6-foot distance, sir?
Yes, I'll place it on your front door, you sign it, then I come back and pick it up. I also want to thank all the participants today. This was, we had to put this together at very short notice. We will try some other mode of having a meeting, but I do want to thank everyone for their cooperation and also the staff.
Thanks, everyone. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, have a good week.
Thank you. Thank you. Stay healthy. Thank you.